name is Jaffe, and I'm a sailor and a writer and a photographer, and we're here in my workshop, and I'm also a leather worker, and we're here in Tasmania. So when I was maybe 15, I was really into computers, I was really into tech, and I had some work experience for a few weeks at a company. And about 6 months later, well no, maybe it was less, maybe just a few months later, I wrote them an email and I said, can you guys send me a reference for my work experience? And they thought I was looking for a job, and which I wasn't, because I was 15. And they said, we'd love for you to come work for us. And I didn't really like school that much. I didn't like being told what to do. And I basically was like, yeah, I'll take that job. That sounds amazing. And so I went home and told my parents, and they were not happy, and we fought about it for weeks. But eventually I got my way. And yeah, I started out in tech as a programmer, and I did that till I was 20 or 21, and I sort of saw the writing on the wall that my life would just be sitting at a computer. And I decided, my other passion was photography, and I decided I wanted to go to university, and I sort of sought out the best art school. I was interested not in technical photography, not commercial photography, I was interested in the art of photography. Yeah, so I put together a folio, and I made an application to the Victorian College of the Arts in the photography department, and I got in, which I was both surprised and stoked by, and yeah, majored in photography. But I was really interested in like conceptual photography. I was very interested in performance art, in video, and also installation art. And so anyway, I ended up finishing art school, and I decided I was going to do a master's in fine art. And the kind of photography I enjoyed was very minimal. It was quite German. There was a lot of the photographers that I enjoyed were coming out of Germany, Dusseldorf, things like that. And so I decided, I had a German background, I had a passport. I decided to take a one-way ticket to Berlin and study fine art and do a master's in fine art, which never eventuated. I realized quite soon that learning German to the level where I could study at masters, learning German to a degree where I could study at master's level was going to take me much longer than anticipated. So anyway, yeah, I started traveling around Europe at the time. I started doing some hitchhiked up to the Arctic Circle. At the time I was also reading a lot. I was reading a lot about art. I was reading a lot about adventure, about sailing, about the ocean, and this sort of stuff. And I hitchhiked up to Norway, and that was where I decided I was going to change what I was doing, and I was going to buy a sailing boat, and I was going to start sailing around the Norwegian fjords. I'd already had an interest in sailing, but it was not I wasn't going to buy a boat and go sailing. I had an interest in sailing. I grew up with Jesse Martin, the story of Jesse Martin, the youngest circumnavigator. I grew up with that story. So I always had this thing in the back of my mind that I found it really interesting. And so yeah, I ended up buying a boat and yeah, changed the course of my life. So when I was on the sailing trip, I was not into photography. I in fact had to sell all my cameras to pay for much of the equipment on the boat. So I really had no equipment. But I had met this documentary filmmaker in Berlin, and he thought the story sounded insane. So he actually started documenting the voyage from the very beginning. And so he bought me a digital camera, a film camera. And so that was really the only sort of visual tool I had on the boat. And yeah, we ended up making a documentary about the trip called Between Home, and he put that together and released that quite a number of years ago. But I've read a lot, and I had a lot of books on the boat, and I think for anyone who reads a lot, you can't help but have a feeling that maybe you would like to write something at some point. I've always had this feeling I was going to write something, I didn't know what it was, and I kept putting things down on paper, and I didn't want to just write a book about how I sailed from A to B. And in the end, I just like wrote it. I just poured it out, and what came out came out.
Yeah.
And that's the book that's out called The Years Thunder By, which came out many years after the voyage. When I sailed my small boat from England to Australia, I essentially went halfway around the world. And so I, some years later, was trying to work out what my next big adventure project would be, and I thought, I'll buy another boat and continue the circumnavigation. And I thought, that's a bit boring. And I thought, maybe I'll do the rest of the world by land. Yeah, so that was the genesis of the idea, and then it was just looking at maps and being like, okay, well, what's the route going to be? And what are the logistics? How do you drive a car around the world? How do you ship a car? That sort of stuff. What kind of car am I going to take? And decided to get a Land Rover Parenti, which was a military variant of the Land Rover 110. So I ended up tracking one of those down, which in my opinion was the most reliable of the Land Rovers ever built. It's got an Isuzu engine in it, but it's very utilitarian. I mean, it's just all canvas. You've got to wear like ear protection to drive it because it's so noisy, and you're covered in dust, and it's as close to like a boat as you could get. So anyway, I set off in 2019 from, I set the parameters of the trip to drive from the most southern road in Australia to the most northern road in Europe, which was from down in Cockle Creek at the bottom of Tassie up into the Arctic Circle in Norway. And I set off and I drove all the way around Australia, got to Perth, packed the car in a container, shipped it to South Africa, flew down to South Africa via Kenya, and then set off on the trip. And then 10 hours up the road, like COVID was a thing. And that was my birthday, the 14th of March 2020, that I decided, okay, I think I need to come home, like this is pretty serious. And I drove the car all the way back. I was on the way to Mozambique, drove the car all the way back to Cape Town, left it with friends and flew home. And left the car there. And thought I'd be back a few months later. I got a return ticket. I was like, told my friends, I'll be back in a few months. I'll keep driving. Came back, and well, as you know how the story goes. So in 2016, I was living in Torquay in Victoria on the surf coast, and I wanted to buy my own house, and I started looking around that area. I had a sort of a criteria of what I wanted. I wanted to be near the ocean, I wanted to have a bit of land, I wanted it to be a bit wild, I wanted to be able to go surfing, I wanted to be close enough to an airport so I could leave. So I had this sort of criteria of what I wanted, and I started looking around the surf coast, and things, met the criteria, but they were just too expensive for me. One of the big drivers in my life is maintaining a sense of freedom in my life, and I wanted to buy a house, but a mortgage is an antithesis to freedom, and particularly the mortgages that I would have had to enter to buy back there. So it's not to say that coming to Tasmania was completely financially driven, but that was a deciding part of the deciding factor. So I started looking at places around here. I'd come here a few times on road trips and things like that, and I remember coming down to Tessellated Pavement back in 2010 on a road trip and thinking, man, this is such a beautiful place, imagine what it would be like to live here. And then I promptly forgot about it, and I was on a different path at that time, and when I started looking to buy a house and this came up, I was like, well, this is it, this is the place. And I saw it on realestate.com.au on a Monday, and I bought it. I flew down and bought it on a Tuesday. So when I bought the house, I had my rental still over on the mainland, and then I had the mortgage here, so I was financially stressed. But that's what I needed to do to get the place that I wanted. I had to act quickly. I thought, I wonder if this Airbnb thing, this is back in 2016, I thought, I wonder if Airbnb would allow me to have some flexibility, but also help with the mortgage. So I started working on the house as an Airbnb. The house ended up getting bookings, and then I had nowhere to live. So I ended up camping the whole summer. I had a van, and I was just like sleeping in the back of the van for the whole summer. But I had, in terms of the leather craft and industrial sewing, that had already started back on the mainland, and I had an interest in industrial sewing from my time on boats, repairing sails and making little things for boats. And so I had all of these machines pretty much that I brought over, all of this equipment. Yeah, and Cohut, which is what it was branded at the time. Now I've changed it to just Nicholas. I just do everything under my own name now rather than trying to brand stuff. Cohut was, I was working with high-tech materials, with sailcloths, like high-tech sailcloths and things. And yeah, so it progressed. It depends how you look at it. It regressed. Went from, high-tech materials down to pretty much the oldest textile in the world. I think leathercraft is particularly difficult because you can never make mistakes. If you punch a needle through leather in the wrong place, well, that's it. That project's done. You start again. So there's something masochistic about working with leather as well. For me, I don't see really a delineation between mediums. I mean, everything in my life is creative. Everything from business to running the Airbnb to the leather work to photography. It's all creative. It's all problem solving. It's all trying to just work things through in a creative way. So, and I don't have a day job where I have somebody else telling me what to do for 8 hours of the day and then I do my own thing the rest of the time. Like it's all me. Everything's my decision, my failure, my success.